Here we go. Now there's 5 people I can ask questions for.
Rise and fall.
Okay.
Got a rowdy group back there.
They are. And you know who's in the middle of it? My wife.
I didn't say that.
Thanks, Steve.
You can say it.
I can say it. All right. There's Mimi. Come on in. Look like a Georgia fan. All right. Okay, couple things. Just as a reminder, this is how the organization of the structure is. If you're a prefect, it means you're over a province that is rough. Doesn't like you, doesn't like the Romans, needs to have troops, lots of troops. And if you're underneath the Senate, peaceful, maybe broke, but peaceful. But under this particular structure, a lot of the money comes in directly to the emperor. It doesn't come into the Senate anymore. So, and to break down the way it is, the pink is all the areas the Senate has, and the green is all the areas that the emperor has. And you can see Judea is certainly, next to Arabia, is underneath the emperor. So, this is the succession. Just a reminder, there's 2 we'll probably look at more than anybody else right now is Augustus and Tiberius. Tiberius was Augustus' son. You had a reign there that went from 27 to 37 AD, so it was a very, very long span between father and son. So, in those days, a decree went out of Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. This is the first registration when Quirinius was governor of Syria, and all went to be registered, each to his own town. And Joseph also went up from Galilee, from the town of Nazareth to Judea, the city of David, which is called Bethlehem. So, and I put in there's Augustus' reign, so it happened there. But Quirinius is also translated as Cyrenius. He was an aristocrat. He was appointed legate over the governor of Syria. After they banished Herod Archelaus from the Tetrarchy of Judea in 6 AD, he was appointed legate over Judea. So you had some expansion there, but the initial time that Quirinius was there, because he wasn't there as late as, this particular time frame, has him in that particular time. So you have an overlap of 6 BC to about 1 AD, and Augustus from 27 to 14. So you kind of see that, and that kind of narrows down a little bit more of when Christ was born. So where's the overlap? If you just have Augustus, that's a pretty big time frame. That's about 40 years. So Quirinius kind of narrows it down, doesn't it? You understand what's going on? Just got louder. Then departed Barnabas to Tarsus. So I'm going to look at all the areas where they talk about the different emperors. Then departed Barnabas for Tarsus to seek Saul. And when he had found him, he brought him to Antioch. It came to pass that a whole year they assembled themselves with the church and taught much people. Disciples were called Christians first in Antioch. So this kind of narrows down when that time was. And in those days came prophets from Jerusalem to Antioch, and there stood one of them named Agabus, and signified by the Spirit that there should be a great dearth throughout all the world, which came to pass in the day of Claudius Caesar. So this isn't the time of Claudius Caesar, but what it says here in Acts, it's a great dearth. Claudius Caesar reigned from 41 to 54 AD. He was from the Praetorian Guard. He tried to revive the ancient Roman religion and expelled the Jews from Rome. So kind of that gives you some clues what it's going to be. It's going to be in the future. But what do you think the dearth will be? Again, this is an impact the emperors had to the scriptures. Help you understand it a little better. Anybody got an idea? If you look at the time frame, does not envelop 70 AD, so it's certainly not that. If Claudius was determined to revive the ancient Roman religion, where would that leave Christians? Yeah, in a bad way. So if this is what Claudius ended up putting out. He ordered the Jews not to hold meetings in Rome around 41 CE. I pulled this directly off the internet. If we look at his letter to Alexandria, he explicitly said, if carried out, this would entice his wrath upon them. So he was serious to shut down Jews and had Jews having meetings and probably any meetings they had in the synagogue, which would include any reach out that people like Paul were going out to try and reach out and teach about Christ. He said they were agitating for more privileges than they formerly possessed, and they were not to send out a separate embassy to Rome. He says if you do that, by all means, he'll take vengeance on them as fomenters of which the general plague infecting the whole world. So what privileges do you think the Jews were agitating for, and why not send an embassy? Don't all of you answer at once. What was the difference between Paul and other Jews?
Paul was a Roman citizen.
Exactly. What did he enjoy?
Because he was Roman, he was under the Roman law.
Due process. If you were just rank and file in the empire and you didn't have those particular privileges, they could kill you. There was no trial. They could do whatever they wanted. So they were campaigning for those kinds of privileges that the Roman citizens had. Further, many scholars contend that this ban, not to hold meetings, failed to stifle the Jewish community, big surprise, that led him to expel the Jews from Rome later that decade. So this would have been about, I think it was in 41 AD, so this would have been about 51 AD. So this is later. After these things, Paul departed from Athens and came to Corinth and found a certain Jew named Aquila, born in Pontus, lately come from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because the Claudius had commanded all Jews to depart from Rome, and came unto them. So, about how long had it been since the prophecy was fulfilled? We call this a short-term prophecy. About a decade, right? It's about 10 years. But you can kind of see the fulfillment of this. That was in, I think, 14 Acts where they talked about it. And here it is in 18 Acts where actually they were expelled from Rome. So, now another one, Tiberius Caesar. Now in the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, remember he is Augustus' son, Pontius Pilate being governor of Judea, and Herod being tetrarch of Galilee, and his brother Philip, tetrarch of Etruria and of the region of Trachonitis, Lysanias, the tetrarch of Abilene, Annas and Caiaphas, I'm having a problem this morning, being the high priest. The word of God came unto John, the son of Zacharias, in the wilderness. So this is Tiberius. He didn't have really too much of a religious bias. And there's an event described here in Luke 3, about 29 AD. That would be, 29 AD would be in the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius. So what's that event? Clue is in verse 2. Yeah, you can say it louder though. It's John. John started his ministry. So, that gives you another time hack of what's going on. This is a succession of prefects in Judea, and we're going to look at a few of them. We're going to look at Pontius Pilate, primarily, and you can see he's from about 26 to 36 AD. But you have other ones that are in there, in and out, more of them. This is particularly the area of Judea. You see the pink and the green. So all those prefects were just over this region. You notice, here's Galilee. Galilee is not underneath the prefect for Judea. It's outside of it. It's under the prefect for Syria. It's a little bit different. Another reason Christ had to go to Jerusalem for Pontius Pilate. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been underneath that particular prefect at the time. So that gives you an idea of the region. I kind of wondered, is it a bigger region or not? But this is a hot spot. And so this was a very specific job for this prefect, was keep the lid on things. And the rest of them that are here, I'm not going to step through each one of them. The worst one I have to think had to be this particular right here, this prefect here. He was born a Jew, but he was Titus's second in command when they eventually razed Jerusalem to the ground. So, and we had more of them that would come all the way up to 70 AD, and Marcus Antonius Julianus. But he was the power that was there as a prefect. So, looking at Luke, and why do you not even on your own initiative judge what is right? For while you are going with your opponents to appear before the magistrate, on your way there, make an effort to settle with him so they may not drag you before the judge. So what Christ is talking to is to say, why aren't you settling these things between yourselves? Why are you going to the governor? Why are you going to the prefect? You've got a king, you've got priests, you've got all these. You can keep going to the wrong people. So they may drag you before the judge will turn you over to the officer, and the officer will throw you in prison. I say to you, you will not get out of there until you have paid the very last cent. Then we go on into Luke 13. So it's kind of the continuation of thought. Now, on the same occasion, there were some present who reported to him about the Galileans whose blood Pilate had mixed, shed along with, their sacrifices. Jesus said to them, do you suppose that these Galileans were greater sinners than all other Galileans because they suffered this fate? I tell you, no. But unless you repent, you will all likewise perish. So I didn't load these questions in right. So how had the Jews received judgments received? How had the Jews received the judgment received by Pilate? In other words, how'd they react to it? Would they kind of try and change the subject, He's kind of bawling out the end of the last chapter, saying, don't be going to the governor. He said, but do you understand what the governor did? Okay, he killed them right along their sacrifices and everything like that. They were Galileans. You're a Galilean, Jesus. Aren't you upset about that? They hadn't received it very well, but they were using it. Jesus' response, do you think that was the response they were hoping for? What response do they get from Jesus? Huh? Yeah, yeah. You shouldn't have gone there in the first place. And, okay, there were Galileans. I'm from Bethlehem. May have been some people I knew, but got a different one there. But again, there's the first scriptural reference to Pilate. So you can kind of see how he was dealing with people. You can kind of see why they were also advocating to get the same rights, to have due process, because if you did something wrong, Pilate didn't like it, he'd just kill you. Couldn't do that if you were Roman. So, now in the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, Pontius Pilate being governor of Judea, and Herod being tetrarch of Galilee, and his brother Philip, tetrarch of Ituraea, and of the region of Trachonitis, and Licinius, the tetrarch of Abilene, Annas and Caiaphas. So this is the same one I read. And I've got Tiberius on here, again, who's Augustus' son. John begins his preaching. Here's Pontius Pilate, and here's the two Herods, Herod Philip and Herod Antipas. So you have them here, and you've got to line up as far as what's going on. So all this particular one in this particular verse, it all seems to line up right around this time as far as who was in power, as far as the kings, the emperor, and also the governor. So what did John begin doing when the word came to him? He started preaching. Okay? He was an unusual looking character. He was in what? Dressed very, very, there wasn't anything nice about the way he was dressed. He was dressed, what? Was it camel skin? Camel hair skin, yeah. And he went out in the wilderness to preach. People came out to him, right? So what year did he begin his preaching? About 29 AD, somewhere around 29 AD. May have been 28, may have been 20, maybe mid-30. We don't know. This one here has in the 15th year. Could have been the beginning of the 15th year, could have been the end. It's hard to place it, but it's around that particular time. So which Herods are being identified in the passage? Huh? The two in purple, yes. It's up there. In the areas, Philip is the area northeast of Galilee. So it's way up. And Antipas is Galilee and Perea. Well, Perea is east of the Jordan, and Galilee is way north, right? What area don't they mention? No, they don't mention Judea. There's a reason they don't mention Judea, but Judea is not in there. There's no king. So then the whole body of them got up and brought him before Pilate. So this is again talking about Pilate. I wanted to go through the different prefix. We have it all through here where he goes to Pilate, and Pilate and chief priests cries, I found no guilty in him, like that. And you get to the end of this particular one in verse 7. And when he learned that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who himself also was in Jerusalem at that time. So what's Pilate trying to balance? Which is unusual for Pilate. Did I ask that one? Yeah. What are the two most important responsibilities levied on Pilate by the emperor or any governor? There are two main things he had to do. What were those two things?
Collect taxes.
Collect taxes. Keep the peace. Okay, so one thing he's trying to balance is, I got to keep the peace. And I've got a bunch of upset Jews. And this is a syndicate. You know, this could blow up, and it does. Continually blows up. So he's trying to avoid that blow up. But what's causing him to say, oh, okay, kill him? Which is, like I said, it's unusual for Pilate. What's he trying to balance? He's pretty sure Jesus is innocent. He's trying to be just, which seems kind of unusual for Herod, for Pilate. Yeah.
Conscience over duty type of balance.
Could be it. Could be part of was his wife said to him. She said, "I had a dream. Don't have anything to do with this." You know, there's a conflict going on. Okay, Pilate's looking for a way out at this particular point, and he sends him to Herod. Which Herod is this? And why would he send him to Herod?
It goes up the chain. It should be probably Antipas.
Actually went down the chain.
Down the chain, sorry. I'm still confused. I taught that last week.
He went down the chain, but he said, I'll go send him to Herod. Herod's in Jerusalem. Why is Herod in Jerusalem? Which Herod is this? This is Herod Antipas. Herod Antipas is the king over which part of the area? Galilee and Judea. Where do they think Jesus is from? Galilee. That's why he sends him to that Herod, Herod Antipas, because he's down in Jerusalem for the Passover. He says, I got this guy problem. I just sent him to the king there. I'm going to dump it in his lap and let him figure out what needs to be done. Now, Herod was very glad when he saw Jesus, for he had wanted to see him for a long time because he had been hearing about him and was hoping to see some sign performed by him. And he questioned him at some length, and he answered him nothing. And the chief priests and the scribes were standing there, accusing him vehemently. And Herod with his soldiers, after treating him with contempt and mocking him, dressed him in a gorgeous robe and sent him back to Pilate. Now Herod and Pilate became friends with one another that very day, for before they had been enemies with each other. So where did Herod Antipas normally reside? Where was his capital? Not in Judea. It's in Galilee. And his capital was Caesarea, which was named after who? Caesar. So, if he's living in Caesarea, which is right there, Caesarea or Tiberias, either one, it's right there on the northwest part of the Sea of Galilee. Think he would have had a chance over the last 3 years to go see Jesus? Where did he do most of his preaching? Where did he walk on water? Galilee. All around the sea. And he says, gee, I was hoping to have a chance to see you. It's like, he's been there for 3 years. Where you been, Herod?
If a guy like that just shows up, I mean, everybody else kind of disappears. They're expecting trouble. You know, I don't even know if he did show up, if we got a good clear. Yeah, we see that was, if the governor comes in, or the sheriff shows up here for church, you know, how many people would just move out, you know?
They might. But he had a chance. Lots of chances to go see some great trick, for him to go do. He'd been hearing about it. What is? Yeah, that tells you the personality of Herod Antipas. Why didn't you come to me? Come entertain me. I'm the king. Okay? So that tells you about his character. His character is pretty arrogant. I didn't put it in this week. I may put it in later, but what's the relationship between Herod Antipas and Herod Philip? Do you know? We'll get to that maybe in a minute. Keep that in mind.
Philip's his nephew, isn't it?
No.
Brother?
His brother.
You know what Antipas means?
No.
It says down here, it means like the Father.
Oh. Okay. So why would Herod Antipas and Pilate now become friends? With what he did to Christ, didn't he give the green light? Didn't he say, I'm going to back you, okay? I got a whole region. I got Perea, which is a pretty big region on the east side of the Jordan River. And you got all of Galilee in that area there. And he's the prefect over Judea, which is south, which is where they're at right now. He's got all these Jews that are supporting it, okay? So he's probably not going to have a revolt, He knew. Was Pilate there when Jesus came into Jerusalem on the Passover week? What was it like? They put down the cloaks on their road. They put down palms on the road. Everybody was cheering. But Pilate's trying to balance things out. Pilate summoned the chief priests and the rulers of the people and said to them, you brought this man before me as one who incites the rebellion to people. And behold, having examined him before you, I have found no guilt in this man regarding the charges which you make against him. So he's still pushing it. Nor is Herod, for he sent him back to us, and behold, nothing deserving death has been done by him. So now he's got a little bit more to go back to the Jews to push back. Therefore, I will punish him and release him. Now he was obliged to release to them, at least at the feast, one prisoner. We kind of talked about that one. He was looking to figure out what he wanted to do, that one. What avenue for justice wasn't open to him or Jesus? Couldn't appeal to Caesar. They cried out together, saying, away with this man, and release for us Barabbas. He was the one who had been thrown in prison for an insurrection made in the city and for murder. Pilate, wanting to release Jesus, addressed them again, but they kept calling out, saying, crucify, crucify him. And he said the third time, why? What evil has this man done? I have found no guilt demanding death. Therefore, I will punish him and release him. But they were insistent, with loud voices asking that he be crucified. And their voices began to prevail, and Pilate pronounced sentence that their demand be granted. So why would Pilate choose to release Barabbas? What may have he misjudged? Yeah, he was a zealot. He was part of the ones that was trying to free them from the Romans. And he probably brought some punitive measures when he did this insurrection. So he was probably saying, he caused them a lot of trouble, so maybe if I offer that, they'll say, well, between the two, I'll go with the lesser. The one who's been healing people, the one who's been compassionate, the one who's helping, as opposed to the one who probably caused them some repercussions because of his insurrection. What was he really trying to do? mean, he propped it up. He said, even Herod couldn't find anything wrong. I can't find anything wrong. Herod couldn't find anything wrong. He was really trying to release him.
Do you think he misjudged the loyalty or where the people lied on his side?
Yeah, and it's like Antipas. Okay, everybody who was there was mostly Judeans. They weren't Galileans. So, he's the king up north. We don't care. He's north of Samaria. We don't care. So there was that difference between maybe what he perceived and what was reality as far as what the people were thinking. So why did he finally meet their demands? That goes back to one of his primary purposes. Keep the peace. It wasn't worth him falling on his sword, so to speak. So, and he called to him 2 of the centurions and said, get 200 soldiers, so this is moving into Acts, ready by the 3rd hour of the night, proceed to Caesarea, with 70 horsemen and 200 spearmen. They were also to provide mounts to put Paul on and to bring him safely to Felix the governor. So this is another governor that's a little bit later on. And he wrote a letter of this form. So the governor at that time, this time frame is 52 to 60 AD. This is Marcus Antonius Felix. He's cruel and he liked bribes. If you could pay him some money, things would happen the way you wanted them to happen. And that's who Paul is being sent to. Now, how did Paul get in this situation? Remember?
Citizen and
That's kind of how he got out of it. That's how he got where he's going to go. But how did he get arrested? Where did this journey start? It started in Jerusalem, in Judea. Because he was teaching. And he got pulled in by the Sadducees and the Pharisees. And they were just having a fit. He's teaching the word. He's teaching the way. He's taking these people away from Judaism. And it was almost a riot. And Paul says, I'm a Pharisee of Pharisees, and I believe life after death. It turned into a brawl, okay? Because at that particular point, the Sadducee says that there's nothing after death. The Pharisee says, yes, there is. There's life after, and there's an argument and everything like that. And what are the Romans there to do? Keep the peace. So they arrest Paul, throw him in jail. And Paul says, is it legal for you to throw me in jail since I'm a Roman citizen? Centurion gets, uh-oh, I've stepped in it big time. So he says, I want to appeal to the governor. And he says, great. And he knew of the plot to kill him. So he sends, let's see, essentially 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen to guard one guy to get him to Caesarea. He says, I'm going to overdo it. But it gives you an idea just how many Roman soldiers were garrisoned in Judea and how much of a hot spot it is. If for one guy, he could spare that many people to go walk him up to Caesarea. They knew the plot to kill him. After 5 days, the high priest Ananias came down with some elders with an attorney named Tertullus. And they brought charges to the governor against Paul, which would be Felix. After Paul had summoned Tertullus, Tertullus began to accuse him, saying to the governor, since we have through you attained much peace, and since by your providence reforms are being carried out for this nation, we acknowledge this in every way and everywhere, most excellent Felix, with all thankfulness. But that I may not weary you any further, I beg you grant us, by your kindness, a brief hearing. how much peace has Felix brought to that nation, and how benevolent and kind has Felix been? Talk about a load of baloney. That is not how they feel about the Romans. He's just buttering them up, or he thinks he is. And I think we used to say, you need to bait the hook a whole lot better than that, because I ain't buying it. For we found this man to be a real pest and a fellow who stirs up dissension among the Jews throughout the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. And he even tried to desecrate the temple. And then we arrested him. We wanted to judge him according to our own law. But Lysias, the commander, came along and with much violence took him out of our hands, ordering his accusers to come before you. By examining him yourself concerning all these matters, you will be able to ascertain the things of which we accuse him. The Jews also joined in the attack, asserting that these things were so. How much of what Tertullus is saying is true? Desecrate the temple. Paul ever do that? No. How much do you think Felix is buying? I don't think he's buying any of it. I mean, didn't he kind of really make his credibility with buttering him up? Kind of like, if somebody does that to me, and I'm sure it does to you, and starts buttering you up, and everybody, if they're going to tell you something, how likely are you going to believe it? Not too likely. But Felix, having a more exact knowledge about the way, which probably came from Licinius, put them off, saying, when Licinius the commander comes down, I will decide your case. So he already had an inkling of what went on. Then he gave orders to the centurion for him to be kept in custody and yet have some freedom, and not to prevent any of his friends from ministering to him. But some days later, Felix arrived with Drusilla, his wife, who is a Jewess, and sent for Paul and heard him speak about faith in Christ Jesus. But as he was discussing righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come, Felix became frightened and said, go away from me for the present. When I find time, I will summon you. At the same time, too, he was hoping that money would be given him by Paul. Therefore, he also used to send for him quite often and converse with him. But after 2 years had passed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus. And wishing to do the Jews a favor, Felix left Paul in prison. So why do you think he had so many one-on-one discussions? Yeah. He said, let all of his friends come and minister to him. In other words, see if they can bring him some money so he can pay me so I can release him. And he didn't understand where Paul's thinking was. Paul says,
Was Paul well off?
he was a tent maker. He wasn't bad off. He was okay. But he had all, if he'd have said the word to the people who are ministering to him, I need money to get bribes so I can get out, they'd have gone out. They'd have gotten money. They'd have come back. But what was Paul's desire? He wrote a book about it, a letter, a long letter. He always wanted to go to Rome. Government's going to pay for it. Festus then, having arrived in the province, so this is the next one, and he had a very short time. He had 2 years that he was the governor. 3 days later, he went up to Jerusalem from Caesarea, and the chief priests and the leading men of the Jews brought charges against Paul. And they were urging him, requesting a concession against Paul, that he might have him brought to Jerusalem at the same time, setting an ambush to kill him on the way. Festus then answered that Paul was being kept in custody at Caesarea, which is up in Galilee, and that he himself was about to leave shortly. Therefore, he said, "Let the influential men among you go there with me. If there is anything wrong about the man, let them prosecute him." So Felix may have sent something to Festus to say, don't send him down to Jerusalem. Keep him up there in the north. Keep him up in Caesarea. So he kind of, now what would have happened if a Roman citizen, Paul, had been killed by the Jews, not Roman citizens, and the prefect had not protected that Roman citizen? That prefect's gone. He didn't do his job. After he had spent more than 8 or 10 days among them, he went down to Caesarea. Actually, he went up. And on the next day, he took his seat on the tribunal and ordered Paul to be brought. After Paul arrived, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood around him, bringing many and serious charges against him, which they could not prove. So this is 2 years later. They're still trying to get Paul. Well, Paul said this in his own defense: "I have committed no offense either against law or the Jews, or against the temple, or against Caesar." So what might be keeping Festus from making a judgment, since there was no proof? No, this is Festus. This is not Felix. This is Festus. Festus is a different guy. Remember the 2 rules. Keep the peace. So he's trying to figure out, okay, how do I cool this off? It's been 2 years, and these guys are still upset about him. They still want to kill him. But Festus, wishing to do the Jews a favor, answered Paul and said, "Are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and stand trial before me on these charges?" And Paul said, "I am standing before Caesar's tribunal, where I ought to be tried. I have done no wrong to the Jews, as you also very well know. If, then, I am a wrongdoer and have committed anything worthy of death, I do not refuse to die. But if none of those things is true, of which these men accuse me, no one can hand me over to them. I appeal to Caesar." Then Festus had conferred with his council. He answered, "You have appealed to Caesar you shall go." Why is he wanting to do the Jews a favor? Keep the peace. Everybody works for somebody. Hey, have you ever kicked a problem up to your boss? Because that's what Festus just did. He kicked this problem up to his boss. We're going to pick up from here next week. Thanks for your attention.